بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وقدوتنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأزكى التسليم. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everybody, welcome. I hope you're all doing well. It's a cold evening in central New York. I think we're supposed to get more snow tomorrow, inshallah, which is fun for some. It's Sunday night, so we're talking about tazkiyat an-nafs, reforming the self, with Raghib al-Asfahani, his book Dhariyah ila Makarim Shariah, the path to virtue, put most idiomatically, literally the path to the lofty and noble qualities that the Shariah wishes you to have. Previously, we had talked about zeroing in on virtues and the interrelationship between them. Raghib al-Asfahani, he was arguing that development of one virtue usually has latent benefits, usually also develops other virtues. He gave several examples about how developing one's intellect leads to increased restraint and generosity and bravery and justice, and how developing one's courage also develops a person's restraint and their generosity. Today, Raghib al-Asfahani, he's going to talk about intention, motivation, why we do the things that we do, or specifically, why we would want to do anything good or virtuous in the first place. It's going to get into some interesting issues that I don't think, talk a lot about typically. We know that things should be intended for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. But what does that mean? What does that look like on the ground? What about if you have mixed intentions? Is intending something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is there just one level to that, or are there multiple different levels? Are some of them loftier and more advanced and more refined than others? Raghib al-Asfahani is going to get into all of this. But first, he takes a step back. 1 second. First, he takes a step back and he asks a question, a philosophical question. What motivates someone to do good at all? It's related to the last chapter, which is about virtue and how the virtues can actually develop one another, but it still begs the question, what makes someone motivated to develop virtue? He's being a little bit more broad here. He says, why do people do good things? What makes them tick? What drives them? I would like to see what you guys come up with for responses. Is there just one thing? Is there a predominant thing? Is there a short list of things that usually drive people to do good? Right? We're not talking about anything bad here. People who want to do good things, whether it's holding the door open for somebody, or if it is, picking something out of the road, smiling, making small talk, anything, from little things to big things, a personal loan, money, helping someone out, flat tire, it could be anything. What motivates Or what are the various things that can motivate somebody to do good? Yeah, Saddam. Is there a psychologist in your house? Because I think I sense some. I think maybe I asked this before, one of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff like that. I took some psychology classes, and so I have some of the language is in me. Reward, whether it's the Shahada family says reward, whether it's an internal feeling that makes you feel good, or external, where the thanks you get from the one who helps you also makes you feel good. Yeah, that's there. So we could say internal, external is a good filter to look through these sorts of motivations. We'll hang on to that. Reward. Yes. What are the types of rewards that are out there? There's a lot, right? What are the other sort of motivations? Let's hear it from hopefully more of you. What can push it? Why do people do good? In general, very, very general. Because we're talking about things that even the kuffar do. MashaAllah, I knew, yes, I knew it. I had like one credit short of an education minor, and so we did a lot of psychology and things like that. Okay, yeah, that's a really timely and current metaphor to strike. Collecting points in a video game, collecting points in the afterlife. Okay, so you're talking about somebody who's trying to do a specific type of good, not a general type of good that just anybody does, but for a person of faith who believes in a higher power, believes in Allah, why they would be motivated to kind of collect points in the afterlife. Good. That begs another question. Is there a difference? Is there a difference between having an intention to please Allah versus to get something in the afterlife? That's a question that the ulama actually have even talked about, but we'll come back to that. Another answer says reward, pleasing Allah, right? So look at the slight difference in language. We have pleasing Allah and getting the reward in paradise, right? All the fruits and all of the shade and all of those things that Allah describes so much in the Quran, right? Is there a difference between those two? And is one of them better than the other? Raghib Asfahani is going to talk about it. People's perception, yep. So for reputation, good. Material benefit, excellent. Yes, happens all the time. Networking. I'm going to hold the door open for you. Even the platitude we hear so commonly, we hear people say, treat others the way you would like to be treated, right? That's kind of the secular morality, right? People who don't even believe in any religion, any afterlife, any God, they'll say, well, the code I live by is treat others the way you want to be treated. Isn't that a form of doing business? Isn't that a form of paying it forward, but hoping you're going to get back in this world a certain treatment from other people, right? Could we say that this is a sort of sincere intention or sincerely for Allah or not? Doesn't really strike me as a very holy intention. It's kind of like, well, if I want to get treated well, I need to treat other people well, right? Shahada family says, I think also, subhanAllah, once you train yourself to get a certain level, it's second nature to do good. It is just viewed that way by the ones around you that might still be trying to reach that level yet. Another comment says, hadith 2 though, right? Want for your brother what you want for yourself. Oh, mashallah. I'm glad you brought that up. Are they the same or is it different? So we have one idea here. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And over here we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Want for your brother what you want for yourself. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى تحب لأخيه ما تحب لنفسه. Right? None of you believes, and the ulama, they said, kamal al-iman, right? Complete belief, until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Is there a difference between these two things? Thank you for bringing that up. I turn it back to you all. Are they the same or are they different? Treat other people the way you want to be treated. None of you believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Talk more about the difference. What's the difference? So we have one, the first one is more of a business transaction because it is focused on what? The hadith is a higher level. The latter is more goodwill. So hanging on to that lens that the Shahada family brought up in the beginning, we have external, internal, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated is talking about the outer world, right? Actions, benefits, rewards. If I stop my car to help someone fill or change a flat tire, I hope that one day when I have a flat tire, somebody's going to stop the car and help me out in the same way. No one's saying that's bad. But is that the same thing? Those are all having to do with the external reality. What about you don't believe completely until you love for your brother what you love for yourself? Isn't that operating at the level of the heart, at the level of what we said was goodwill, intentions, right? Because somebody who achieves this, the outward thing, they might just be doing business. Right? I'm a nice guy because I want other people to treat me nice. Or they might be just a victim to peer pressure. Huh? I'm a nice guy because I want other people to know me as a nice guy, a summa, right? Reputation. But the hadith, subhanAllah, and look at the wording of the Prophet ﷺ, mu'jiz, right? A miraculous wording. The wording gets away from all of those sort of loopholes and says that you're not a complete believer until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. SubhanAllah. So whether you're able to do it or not is an entirely separate issue. It's about what you love for somebody, which is a much higher level of action, of faith, of virtue. Ya salam. Thank you for bringing that hadith up. That's very, very important. We have a society that works off of the first platitude, and we hope for an ummah that works off of the second, the hadith. Excellent work. So Raghib al-Asfahani, he breaks it down much like all of you did. However, he had the benefit of sitting down at a book with a pen and writing all of this, and so he puts it in a very nice order. He says, first of all, let's separate good into two categories, okay? Good in this life, right? The holding the doors open, the helping change the spare tire, the visiting you when you're sick, food, all of this sort of thing. Money. And the second category of good, the good of the afterlife. All right, so we have some answers that were addressing that, paradise and this, that, and the other. Okay, so he's going to separate them into good within this world and good in the afterlife. Then he's going to focus on one and then the other. So when it comes to why people do good in this world, he says there's three reasons or three main motivations. And yes, they are ranked. Some of them are baser than others. Some of them are better, loftier than others. The lowest motivation one can have, according to our author, is reward and punish. Reward and punish, right? This physical, material reward or a physical, material punishment, right? Many of this was mentioned. The carrot and the stick, so we say. Doing good because you hope for some sort of gain for yourself, or else you fear some sort of harm for yourself. We start out children with this sort of motivation. Eat your vegetables, or else what? You won't get dessert. Isn't that true? Huh? If you do your chores, you'll get allowance. You'll get a little bit of money. Or you'll get in school, maybe you'll get a gold star. Right? There's some sort of material candy, something like that. Even, I laughed when I was thinking about these examples because the motivators don't change a whole lot from preschool to college even. What does everybody say? If you want to get people to come to your event at college, what do you need? You need free pizza, right? This is how it goes. So the college student, estudiambre, the college student, and the preschooler are often motivated by the material reward and scared away from things by the material threat of harm or the actual material harm. We see this all the time in advertising and marketing as well. Just think of every single commercial for perfume, fragrance, and shaving equipment that you've ever seen. Isn't there a lot of innuendo going on in those sorts of commercials? Right? Isn't the subtext of the commercial that if you use this product, it will elevate your appeal and get you this sort of thing that you're looking for? Yes. Of course, they have to hide it behind layers and layers of suggestion and innuendo, but that's crudely, that's the message that they're sending. Even following many of the laws that we have, whether it's the speed limit or parking regulations, right? These come to our base motivators, right? In this case, avoiding a punishment. Taxes. If the IRS didn't exist and they weren't going to look over and you didn't have the possibility of being audited, how many people would pay their taxes, right? This is base level, hitting people where everybody can understand the language and their material rewards, material harms. Financial incentives too. For example, loyalty programs. Yes, of course. Yeah, financial incentives, definitely. 100%. You get cards, if you purchase a certain amount, then you get something free, this and that and the other. How credit cards work with rewards and all this stuff. It's all financial incentives. And there's nothing morally wrong with this sort of thing, inherently. There are ways in which it can be less than ideal. There are ways in which it can be wrong, but this is the basest, meaning the least optimal, the lowliest form of motivating somebody. We would hope that for important moral things, we would not have to expect people to be motivated by these sorts of concerns. You don't want people trying to be better, trying to be nicer, trying to be more faithful, more honest, in order to get other material things, right? You want them to be motivated by something loftier. Before we get to those other lofty levels, there's a couple other examples to think about. That's food for thought. What about our friendships and our acquaintances? How many times do we pick up the phone and message someone or call someone or email them when we need something from them. And when we don't need anything, where's our relationship at? Whether it's family or friends or acquaintances, people in the Muslim community, everybody's guilty of this. I'm guilty of this, right? Basest level of motivation. I need something from this person. I'm going to reach out and to message them. I want to be treated better in my marriage, and so I'm going to better myself. Ooh, that's a common one. When it comes to marriage counseling, I hear a lot of people frustrated because they're trying to work on themselves and they don't feel like their spouses are changing at the same rate. Isn't there an element of anticipated material benefit going on? Aren't they hoping to change themselves, to be more patient, to be more responsive in order to get also treated the same way by the other person? It's a motivator, but it's not necessarily the best one. What's the common thread between all of these? Raghib Asfahani says that a person who is only motivated by this level of motivation, they are controlled by their urges and their impulses, by their hawa, by their shahwa. And so this is the only language that they understand. This is obviously an external motivation. Above that, the next level up Raghib Asfahani, he says, is hoping for praise, al-madh, and fearing blame, al-lawm. Right? This we see most dramatically with teenagers. We have peer pressure, we have youth culture, we have popularity, and social media, which is all just a big popularity contest. You're calibrating, whether you know it or not, what you're going to say, what you're going to do, in order to get praise from others or to avoid blame. This happens with imams, religious figures, students of knowledge. There's certain issues, if you talk about them, everybody's going to praise you. There's certain issues, if you bring them up, everybody's going to blame you. Right? It can happen to anybody. And so, even though it's a unavoidable part of life, and sometimes it can be a good thing. We talked about in the khutbah the other week about how when it comes to masjid attendance, outside of a pandemic, of course, but going to the masjid, how having that accountability with other people, right? If you stay home, if you're feeling lazy, you don't want to go to the masjid, you see the time on your clock, you know you have enough time to get there, you say, oh, I'm just gonna maybe next time, inshallah, right? Doesn't it pass through your mind, well, there's going to be other people that are going to be there, and they're not going to know, they will notice that I wasn't there, or they likely will. And so the next time I show up, if somebody says to me, oh, mashallah, I haven't seen you in a while, oh, there's this little twinge of guilt inside, and we feel like we have to explain ourselves. Oh yeah, I've been really busy, work's been really tough, and the kids got sick and this and that, right? This is a good thing. It doesn't mean that you're fake. It doesn't mean you're a hypocrite or anything like that. This is part of the hikmah and wisdom of having community life, having accountability towards each other. But there's certain ways in which it can be all wrong. We see that with the teenager examples. What you wear, who you associate with. We have so many of our Muslim youth that hide their deen and hide their Islam because of fear of blame or hoping for praise, right? A Muslim who has a girlfriend or a boyfriend will not be blamed in high school. They will be praised. Somebody whose name is Muhammad and they shorten it to Mo, right? This is something that they're afraid of other people's blame. Or God forbid somebody have the name Usama, which is a beautiful name that we love. as Muslims. But because of recent history and politics and things like that, now anybody who has this name, they feel like they need to hide. Your son or your daughter are in the cafeteria, it's Ramadan, they're not eating their food. Somebody asks them why they're not eating. They say, oh, I'm not hungry. This is fear of blame. Praying Jummah for the men once you reach puberty. They have high school, they go to school on Friday. Most times they don't, we haven't figured that out yet in a lot of communities, how to work with the school system to find some sort of accommodation. Sometimes I feel like the schools would be accommodating, Allah knows best, if we asked. Part of us were shy. We don't want to stick out. Maybe we're afraid of asking too much. Maybe we still feel like guests. Allah knows best. We do this too with our relationships, and I always like to bring it back to relationships, especially the spousal relationship, because it's so crucial to our lives. How many times do we do or not do something, not out of the goodness of our hearts, not necessarily because we're looking for a material reward, but because we're afraid of getting blamed? If I don't hang up the laundry, if I don't put away the laundry, if I don't wash the dishes, oh boy, am I going to hear it. Again, this isn't bad, but we're showing the levels of motivation. This is a higher, a more refined level of motivation than just material benefit. But it's not as far as we can go, right? There's one level higher. This level, this second level, it's still external to ourselves. It's for the people who are controlled by shame. And some shame is good, don't get me wrong. We rely on shame for a lot of different things. But it's not sufficient, it's not adequate. There's another level to break through for the person who is looking to improve themselves. And if you're trying to develop virtue, if you're trying to get religious, if you're trying to learn about this deen, then this is not going to cut it. Trying to become a virtuous person because you're afraid of other people's blame, or you're trying to get other people's praise, that's a recipe for disaster. They used to tell us this in the Kulliyah when we studied in Medina. They said that if you're not doing this for Allah, go be a banker, go be an engineer, go do something else, please. Because this specific thing, there's no other correct niyyah. There's no other acceptable intention except for khalisan lillah, except for just to please Allah. Other things, yeah, sure. You want to become a doctor because you want to make a ton of money. No problem. Halal. La ishkal. Yajuz. It's no problem. But if we're talking about purifying your soul, becoming more like the Anbiya or Mursaleen, becoming the Khalifa, the type of person that Allah wanted you to be on earth, this cannot be done just for people's praise or people's blame. What must it be for? It has to be for an internal motivation. Raghib al-Asfahani, he says, the highest level of good in this world, we're talking about doing good in this world, is to embody good, and you're seeking virtue. You're doing it to transform yourself. You're not worried about the noise on the outside. You're not concerned about whether you get material benefits or whether you get material harm. You're not concerned about praise from other people, nor are you concerned about blame. Whatever comes your way, it's going to come your way. But you're looking to transform yourself. You're looking to become better, to mold yourself into a better individual. Raghib al-Asfahani, he says, this is the highest level of proper motivation when it comes to doing dunyawi good. You show up to the class because you want to learn. You take on mentors, sometimes mentors that are hard on you. Remember, he said in a couple lessons ago, he said the limits of a sheikh, or the limits of a Rabbani, a person to a mentor. You will actively remove harmful situations from others. We're starting to see the confluence between this level of intention and the hadith. You're loving for, yes, very good, having a friend that is agreeable and a mentor that is I don't know if he said is tough, but something like that. Yeah, a tough mentor, sincere. I think he said sincere. I'll have to check my notes. But yes, you remove harm actively from other people because you're in it for the virtue. You're in it for the goodness. You don't care whether anybody notices you. You're not snapping a picture of yourself, a selfie, and putting it up on Instagram. You're proactive with your relationships. And this is something that I fail at every single day, and something that the couples that I counsel also struggle with. Not just letting your relationships cruise along until something goes wrong. Now we have to fix it. But being proactive with your relationship, going out of your way to do things good, not because you're seeking their praise or afraid of their blame, but because you want it to transform yourself. You want it to mold yourself into a different person, a person that just becomes, as someone said in the comments earlier, it becomes second nature. Right? This is a higher plane. It's as if it's like your service. You become a servant to everyone around you. And the good that you do is like your philanthropy. This is somebody, Raghib al-Asfahani says, that is controlled not by their shahwa, not by their material interest or their urge, not by their sum'a, their reputation, but they're controlled by their aql. They're controlled by their intellect. They have a handle on themselves. They realize what's real in this life and what's not, what's worth paying attention to and what's not. A brief point before we move on to the second category of good, otherworldly good, good in the afterlife, eternal good. These things are very, very important to keep in mind for raising children. Because when we're trying to develop our children's Muslim identity, we're trying to encourage our children to have a relationship with the Quran, a relationship with the Salah, a personal relationship with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A lot of times we're stuck at level 1 and 2, meaning that we're motivating our children from the outside. You have to, in the beginning, right? You have to say, no, you haven't done your Quran today. Go do your Quran, right? You have to express disappointment when things don't go exactly the way that you expect them to go. But the ultimate goal is to break through those 2 levels and get to the 3rd level where the child is internally motivated. If you don't get to that level before your child goes away to college, if they do go away, or before they move out, then what's going to happen? All of those external motivators are gone. This happens too often to Muslim youth who go to college, that they were motivated by material things to be a good Muslim. They were motivated by fear of blame from their community and their family, wanting praise from their community and family. Then they go to college, and now all of those material incentives are different. People are going to praise them for totally different things. People are going to blame them for totally different things. People are going to open up access, networking, jobs, relationships for different behaviors than being a good Muslim, right? So if by the time they haven't gotten there, they haven't found that internal motivation, by the time they get to that age, it's very, very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. Nasallallahu salama. Then Raghib al-Asfahani, he turns his attention to the second category of good. Okay? Good in the afterlife. And so he's going to now make a similar comparison. He's going to draw an analogy between the two. He said, look at the three levels of motivation for good in this world, the dunyawi good. Right? Material, reward and punishment, praise and blame, and then seeking virtue. He said, even when it comes to doing things for your akhirah, even when it comes to doing things for your afterlife, there are levels for your niyyah, for your intention or your motivation. The lowest one, he says, is seeking the reward or fearing the punishment of Allah. Strange on the ears, right? You want Jannah, you want the fruits, you want the ease, the salama, right? All of these sorts of different things, good things, pure things, beautiful things, jaiz, permissible, acceptable, sahih. But there's a higher level of motivation to be had for those who want to strive, for those who want to raise their level in paradise. The next level up that Raghib al-Asfahani, he says, is seeking Allah's praise and fearing Allah's blame. You don't care so much about the fruits and the lahm, the meats and the sweet treats and all these sorts of things that are motivators for many people, including myself, sure. But you care what Allah thinks about you. Is Allah going to praise me? Is Allah going to blame me? And the very, very highest level, according to our author, Raghib al-Asfahani, is to do things for the pleasure of Allah solely. Not because of the benefit that you're going to get out of it from Allah being happy with you, right? It's like the student to the teacher. We feel good when the teacher praises us because that's what we're going for. But the difference is when the teacher is pleased with us and we're just happy to see the teacher pleased. That's the example. That we could bring happiness to the teacher is our pleasure. And so desiring Allah's pleasure, then it's no longer transactional. Ya salam. Very well put. Then it's no longer a transaction. Everything else is transactional. And those transactions are jaiz. I mean, there's khilaf in the ulama. The ulama talked about whether it's permissible to simply do good with the niyyah of the fruits of Jannah. Most of them said yes. Some of them said no, it's not. You have to seek to please Allah. Number 2 or number 3. But the majority of scholars, they say yes, 1, 2, and 3, whether it's for the rewards of paradise or the punishment of hell, or whether it's the praise and blame of Allah or the pure pleasure of Allah, it's all permissible. But the last level, the highest level, is not a transaction. And Raghib al-Asfahani, he brings up a story. He brings up a story to beautifully illustrate this. He says that once there was a wise man and someone came to ask him a question. He asked the wise man, or I should say, he heard the wise man making dua and he didn't ever once hear him ask for anything in paradise. And he asked the wise man, he said, wait a second, don't you ask Allah for paradise? And the wise man, he replied with a famous Arabic proverb, al-jar qabl ad-dar. He said, the neighbor before the residence, right? Or the neighbor before the house. What he's saying is that Jannah, everything else, yes, okay, nice. But what's the purpose of being there? I want to be in the proximity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That's what I'm excited for the most. That's my goal, is to be in the presence, to be in the proximity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything else is just side dressing, icing on the cake. We have a question that somebody sent me. How can we ensure we are so deliberate and measured in our intention, considering usually we rush through our day? A lot of these things are in the moment. They happen quickly. That's a much longer response that we have adequate time to adequately answer. And Raghib al-Asfahani will get through some responses to that later in the book. However, in brief, the answer is part of your question. Rush. There's some ahadith, and there's khilaf of whether these ahadith are sahih or not, that the Prophet ﷺ might have said, al-ajla min ash-shaytan, that haste is from the devil. Because haste is the enemy of pure intention. So if our rushing, our haste, is preventing us from having a sincere intention, then the short answer is we need to slow down and move more intentionally. Question 2, is there something in the Sunnah, either in dua or an incident, that demonstrates how the Prophet ﷺ implemented this highest level of intention? Raghib al-Asfahani, he mentions an ayah, which you're probably familiar with. It's in Surah Al-Kahf. Allah says, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. So be patient. Literally, make yourself patient with those who call upon their Lord, their sustainer, in the mornings and in the evenings, seeking Allah's face. So there's an implicit message in here. Who deserves patience? Allah didn't say seeking Allah's Jannah. I don't think you'll ever find, even in the Quran, and correct me if I'm wrong if someone knows better, an ayah that praises the people who yuridun al-Jannah. There might be, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting Jannah. But how many times more do we find this phraseology, yurid wajha, right? They want Allah's pleasure. So from the Quran, Allah has shown us, even in an implicit way, that the right way to motivate, or I should say not the right way, but the highest level of motivation is seeking Allah's face, seeking Allah, instead of some sort of transactional fashion. As for in the Sunnah or the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, there's Hadith Jibreel. That's the thing that comes to my mind the quickest. When Jibreel asked him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is ihsan? And the answer was, you worship Allah as if you see Him. And if you can't achieve that, according to the tafsir of many of the ulama, then worship Him knowing that He sees you. So we have something about, it's not sarih, honestly. It's not completely explicit to what you're asking for. But what the Prophet ﷺ said is the highest level of ihsan was something that was very intimate between you and Allah. Nothing else is mentioned. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say, ihsan is to worship as if you can taste the river of asal, of honey in paradise, right? Or so you can get the non intoxicating khamr of paradise, right? He said that the highest level of ihsan is to worship Allah as if you see Him. كأنك تراه. And if you can't do that, then again, this is not explicit, this is implicit. The Prophet ﷺ said, as knowing that He sees you. So him knowing that He sees you is more external motivator, right? A little bit more transactional. You're afraid of something, or you want something. You're afraid of His watching over you. As for the first, and Allah knows best, it seems to me a little bit more pure and intimate and direct. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Anybody have any questions before we part for tonight? Ameen wa iyyakum. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I hope to see you soon, inshallah. That's good. Oh, thank you so much. Yes. Next week, 8 p.m. Yes, all classes are now, all evening classes are now 8 p.m. starting next week. Someone sent me this. Inna salati wa nusuki wa hayati. Aywa. Wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. La sharika lah. That's the end of Surah Al-A'raf. Correct? So there you go. Very nice. That's a good example of what you're talking about. It says, my prayer, my soul, my life, my death, it's all for Allah. It's not all for Jannah. It's not all for the asl, the lahm al-tayr, and the fakiha. It's for Allah. Very nice. Excellent work. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.